This is Module E, and we're going to be talking about making business decisions with time value of money. Before we start that, however, I need to review some of the basics of TVM and teach you to do something different with one of your calculators. If you remember rightly, the discounting of a stream of unequal cash flows was somewhat cumbersome. If you had a stream of cash flows which was $90 at the end of one period, $95 at the end of the second period, and $99 at the end of the third period, the way to figure out the value of the total proposition was to discount each of them separately and add them together. For example, if you require a 12% rate of return, when you discount $90 at the end of one period, it's worth $80.3571. When you discount $95 at the end of two periods, it would be worth $75.7334. And when you discount $99 at the end of three periods, it's worth $70.4662. Adding those up, you come up with just under $226.56. Now clearly, if you had a longer stream of cash flows, this would be a very, very cumbersome process. And while Excel is capable of doing this pretty readily, there is an easier way when you don't have Excel handy. For example, if you're using your financial calculator. We're going to use a new function on the financial calculator. We're going to be using the NPV function. Now on the BA2 and on the HP12C, there's a button that actually says NPV. And the BA2 it's the second row down and it's the center button. And on the HP12C, the NPV function is above the PV. So we're going to use the yellow button, the yellow F button, to access the NPV function, which is above PV. On the TI-83 and 84 what we're going to have to do is get into the finance apps, just like we would if we were going to get into the TVM solver. But rather than selecting the TVM solver, which is option 1, we're going to scroll all the way down to the 7th option, which says NPV. If you highlight number 7 and you press Enter, what it's going to show on the screen are the letters NPV and an open parenthesis. On the right side of the screen is a section of one of the cheat sheets that I put together. This is actually cheat sheet number 2, or part 2, I guess I should say, of the How Do I Use This Financial Calculator sheet. So if you were to go to my website, you can download that from the calculators page. And you can look at this in greater detail. What I'm showing on the screen is how to go through a solution for a set of uneven cash flows using each one of these three calculators. On the BA2 we're going to go through the same basic step to clear the memory that we did before, and then we're going to enter in the keystrokes as shown. On the HP12C, we're going to enter in the keystrokes as shown. And on the TI-84 and the 83, we're going to be entering in some things, and I've made the text that you're going to put in a little bit larger so that you can see where there's a round bracket or parenthesis and where there's a curly bracket. Pay particular attention to the placement of commas. The commas are important and the curly brackets are important. So as we go through this, you're going to want to make sure that you get the syntax correct, otherwise it will give you an error. On the cheat sheet, just like before, there's an example scenario and a solution. And then below that is the information that tells you exactly what to do to get the correct answer. So here's our scenario. An investment has a set of cash flows shown below. You must determine what this investment is worth if the rate of return you expect for investments with similar risk is 12%. The answer you're going to get is $1,000.1792, and the cash flows as shown are $100 at the end of the first period, $200 at the end of the second period, $300 at the end of the third period, $400 at the end of the fourth period, and $500 at the end of the fifth period. For the BA2 we're going to clear the memory and get into the appropriate part of our NPV memory. So we're going to start entering things in by pressing the CF button, the cash flow button. We're going to enter a 0, first of all. The 0 represents the cash flow at time 0. There's nothing going on at time 0, so we're going to put a 0 in there as a placeholder. We press Enter and the down arrow. And your calculator is going to show you a prompt then at each step along the way. So if we've entered in our information as promised, what it's going to show you is C01, and it's got a series of zeros next to it. What you need to then do is put in 100, press the Enter button, and press the down arrow twice. Just go ahead and do it twice. It's going to show you, when you press it once, F01 with a value of 1.0. Just ignore that and move down to the second space, which will again say C02. You'll enter in the second cash flow there, 200, press Enter, press the down arrow twice, so we're going to skip over F and go back to C03. enter in the third cash flow, the fourth cash flow, and the fifth cash flow, etc., etc. You're then going to press NPV. It's going to prompt you with an I, and you're going to enter the interest rate involved, which was 12%. You enter that as a whole number again. You press Enter, the down arrow. It'll show you NPV on the screen again, and you press Compute, the CPT button. And the screen should show you the correct answer, the 1000.1792. On the HP12C, if you have one of those, it's very simple. You're simply going to follow the instructions as shown. So we're going to enter a 0. We're going to use the blue G button and the PV button to load that into the appropriate memory center. Now, the register that corresponds with that initial cash flow is going to be labeled CFO on your key. And if you look underneath the PV key, in very small blue writing, it says CF with a little 0 underneath it. By using the G function, we're accessing that blue label, and we're storing our first cash flow, the 0 value there. After that, we enter in the $100 G and payment to load that into the first memory slot, G 200, and then G and payment to load that into the second memory slot, and so forth for each of those entries. After we've got all of those entered in, we're going to type 12, press I, which loads the interest rate into the memory, and then we press FPV. Now by pressing FPV, again, we're accessing the NPV function, which is up above that key, and it should give you the correct answer, 1000.1792. On the TI-83 and the 84 Plus, it's a little bit different. As I said, we're going to go into the apps section and find our finance apps, and we're going to scroll down to the 7th option, which should say NPV. If you select that, all that your screen is going to show you are the letters NPV and an open parenthesis, and your cursor is flashing next to it. What you need to then enter is what's shown for the syntax. So we're going to enter a 12 and a comma, and we're going to enter a 0 and a comma. And then we're going to open a curly bracket. Now the curly bracket is up above the parenthesis, so you're going to use your second button and press the parenthesis, and it should give you a curly bracket, not a round parenthesis. What the curly brackets are going to do is they're going to set aside a list of information that we're going to use. In this case, a stream of cash flows that we need to discount the value of. We'll enter each of those in with a comma between each one. And then you close the curly bracket. So again, it's the second button and the parenthesis key. That should show you the curly bracket. Then you add the closing parenthesis. So there's a round parenthesis at the end. And then you use your alpha and solve buttons. So we're going to press alpha and enter. And the result it should give you is, again, 1000.1792. Now this is the basic syntax that we're going to be using for a couple of functions that we're going to be using in this module. So make sure if you're using one of the TI-84 Plus or the TI-83 that you're putting the syntax in properly. It could be that we're going to have a circumstance where we've got a set of cash flows which have independent cash flows which are different, and then some of them will repeat. So in the case of this example, we see a $100,000 cash flow after year 1, $90,000 in the second year, $80,000 after the third year, and then $25,000 for each of the following 6 years. Years 4 through 9 are going to have a $25,000 cash flow. If you require a 9% rate of return for investments of similar risk, the question is, how much would you pay for that investment? The answer your calculator is going to give you is $315,867.80. In the case of the BA2 Plus, we're going to go through the same sort of a process we did before, but we're going to start using that F function when we get to the proper cash flow. So working with the BA2 Plus, we're going to clear our memory, and we're going to enter in our first cash flow, which is 0. We press enter and the down arrow once, and then we enter our first cash flow, 100. Press enter and the down arrow twice. So we're skipping over that F entry. We enter 90. Press the down arrow twice. We enter 80. Press the down arrow twice. Then we enter 25. Enter and press the down arrow just once. Now it's going to show you F04. And currently F04 should say 1. You need to change that so that it says 6. So I'm going to type a 6 and press enter. Now it says F04 equals 6.0000. I'm going to press my down arrow Then I'm going to press NPV. I press the interest rate I'm interested in, which is 9%, enter. Press the down arrow, it prompts me for NPV, and I have to press compute. And it should give you the correct answer, which is 315.8678. Now remember, the numbers that I'm looking at up in the scenario are in thousands, so 100,000, 90,000, 80,000. And what I've entered in were simply numbers that were rounded off. So I entered in 100, 90, 80. And so the answer the calculator is showing me is something I'm going to have to multiply up to get the correct scale. So because it's in thousands, my screen is showing me 315.8678, but my actual answer is $315,867.80. For the HP12C, the process is very much like we did before. We're going to use the G button in order to load numbers into the correct memory register. But after we load the 25 in, we're going to press a slightly different button. We're going to press 6, and then the G button, and then the FV button. Underneath the FV is the label NJ, and that is the number of times that cash flow J would be repeated. So we enter that in, we go through, we put in the interest rate, and we solve for the net present value, and it's going to show us 315.8678 again. On the TI-84 and the 83, we're going to use the same syntax we did before. We pull up the NPV function, and it will give us the opening parenthesis. We just enter a 9, a comma, a 0, a comma, open a set of curly brackets, and enter the numbers that we're interested in, the cash flows that we're interested in, 100, 90, 80, 25. Close the curly brackets, then type a comma, then open another set of curly brackets, and you're going to enter the following instructions to the calculator. You're going to tell it to repeat the first cash flow once, so I put a 1 and a comma. I'm going to repeat the second cash flow once, so I put a 1 and a comma. I'm going to use the third cash flow one time, so I put a 1 and a comma. Then I put a 6 because it's going to use that fourth cash flow 6 times in the computations. Close the curly brackets, close the parenthesis, and solve. And it should give you the correct answer, which is 315.8678. Now, something that's very important to not get muddled with in the TI-84 Plus is that you don't put a comma at the end of the string of numbers. So you have the 100, 90, 80, 25. There's no comma at the end of that string of numbers, but there is one in between the two sets of curly brackets. Without the commas in the right place, again, this calculator will give you an error.